Enforcement of the Real ID Act has been postponed yet again. Real ID is a national ID card that every person would be required to have to board an airplane or enter a federal building. Do you favor a national ID system? If so, why? We'll discuss it today on Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on Earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it.
Well, I'll say one thing for them. They are determined. I mean, this Real ID Act was supposed to have been enforced on May the 11th of 2008. Here we are. We're now in 2011. They set a new date for, I think, May the 11th or May the 20th of 2011. Now the announcement comes out today. Nope, not going to happen again this time. We're now postponing it till January of 2013. I'm talking about the Real ID Act. Now let's wind the clock back so we'll all understand, because it's been a while since we've been down this road, but we need to talk about it because these people are determined by hook or crook to wiggle this way in and implement it upon the American people, even though we don't want it. Now, first of all, plain and simple, what's this all about? It's a national ID card. It is requiring all Americans to carry a card with you at all times to prove who you are and that you're legally in the United States of America, so your identity can be checked. It's a control instrument. That's what it is. It's designed to control where you move, where you go, where you work, whether you can, whether you cannot, whether you travel or not. It's designed as a national ID. It's very much like the papers that were required in Nazi Germany. Now, the United States of America, there have been many attempts to impose a national ID upon us, and we have always put our foot down and said, not happening. We are not going to be tracked and controlled by our government. We don't believe in socialism. We believe in freedom, and those are opposite terms. It's impossible to have socialism and freedom at the same time, because socialism, by its very definition, is governmental control of the means of production and actually governmental control of everything. So, where are we at? How did we get here? Well, let's wind the clock back just a moment. And even back in the 1980s, Mr. Marvin Stone, who at the time was editor-in-chief of U.S. News and World Report, wrote an article encouraging the adoption of a national ID to solve the immigration problem. Now, we've been able to solve this problem for the last 2,000 years, but all of a sudden we need to solve this problem that we had been able to coexist with for the last 2,000 years. And the reason we were starting to have to solve the problem was because we were no longer enforcing our borders. Consequently, they began to propose a national ID. Well, when it was brought to the attention of President Ronald Reagan, the possibility of instituting a national ID system, he looked up in the cabinet meeting and said, well, that's the mark of the beast. We're not doing that. End of discussion. Boy, don't you wish you had a president like that today. Anyway, that was the end of the national ID talk for a while, until the attack on the trade towers in New York on 9/11, and they created the 9/11 Commission. Now, Congress gave the 9/11 Commission strict orders. Bring back your recommendations. Study what we can do to enhance Homeland Security, but do not advise the establishment of a national ID card. We're not going to do that. So, Henry Kissinger and all, he was one of the main ones that served on that commission. They come back, and when they get back, guess what they propose? there needs to be some kind of a system of identification in order to make sure everyone is legal and so on. Well, they tried to couch it in terms, because they were explicitly instructed by our Congress, no national ID. But they came back really with a recommendation for a national ID. However, the Congress understanding and the Bush administration understanding how adamantly opposed to a national ID system Americans are, because we understand full well it's the first step to tyranny. If you one time are able to number everybody, put them under control, so you can put them in a database, and you can either grant them privileges or withhold those privileges. And if you have a national ID card that's required for identification at federal buildings and in order to fly on an airplane, and then, of course, after a while, all of the stores are going to say, oh, I want to see your ID card in order to stay the night in a hotel, in order to write a check or even use a credit card. And after a while, everywhere you go, you're going to need your ID. So you establish in the computer systems of the world a nice little trail until after a while they can track your movements 24/7. Now, don't think it can't happen. They've already gone to court many times and they've subpoenaed the records of an individual. Where did you go? What did you purchase here? When were you there? From what time to what time? And after a while, there have been divorce cases, won or lost, on that issue alone, and many, many other cases, criminal cases, to prove that people were at a certain place at a certain time, and ultimately they were able to convict them of a crime on the basis of being able to track them. So Americans understand very well the power of a national ID card to track us. Now, we have other things we're contending with as well right now. Nevertheless, we haven't wanted a national ID. So when they came back with this recommendation, well, the administration wanted it desperately. They wanted to get us to be more manageable. I mean, after a while, after all, you can't control what you can't manage. I mean, what you can't track, right? If you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. And how's the government going to manage all of us if they can't keep track of what we're doing? How's that sound to you? Do you want the government managing you? Is that what we want? A government that manages us, that controls us? Now think a minute. Control and freedom, opposite terms. So this is a control mechanism, obviously. Control whether you get on a plane, control whether you go into a federal building, and then it expands out. Control whether you get a job or not. So the Bush administration, we lobbied against it. We bombarded Congress. We did a calling campaign on this program. Everybody call your senators. Everybody call your congressmen. But they rammed it through anyway. We actually published a special edition of Endtime magazine, sent one to every senator, every congressman, trying to lobby against it. We couldn't get it stopped. They were determined, because it's not just a national ID. They want a global ID system. As a matter of fact, they've actually passed a global ID system now. The International Civil Aviation Organization of the United Nations is called the ICAO. They, as of April of 2010, got 186 nations, which is almost all the nations on Earth, to sign on to these certain standards for identification documents. So today, there is an RFID chip in every passport. If you received your passport after what? Maybe 2009, I don't remember the exact date, but all passports today have this new technology built in. It's called an RFID, radio frequency identification chip. And it's in there so that you don't actually have to swipe your passport across the machine anymore. All you have to do is come into close proximity to the machine, and it just picks it up. It's very convenient. Now, the problem is they can put a lot of information on that RFID chip. They can put your picture, your history. I mean, you know how much information you can put on a computer chip. It's mind-boggling. Well, that's what we're dealing with now. Furthermore, Those are readable sometimes by passersby. There's already been people done experiments, and they have a portable reader system that they purchased at Radio Shack for $100, and they walk through an airport and they just download people's passport numbers and their information. They can go make them a passport, substitute their picture for your picture. You look like you're legal, and so the guy in the control booth, he looks at you, he looks at your picture, it comes up, and everything looks fine. And they've already done experiments to show this can be done. Any identification system that can be built by man can be tricked by man. It may be a little complex. You say, well, I would never do that. No, you wouldn't. That's the reason you don't need one. It's the criminals that would go to all that trouble that would do it, and that's the reason that we're not guarded from them by the system. This only serves to control law-abiding citizens. It's not going to work on the criminal element, but it's certainly going to give government power over you. Okay, now one more thing we got to talk about before we get too deep into this. So, does anyone know the purpose of government? Have you ever stopped to think about it? Is the government supposed to control you? No, that's not the purpose of the government. The purpose of our government is to protect our freedom. The Constitution is designed to limit government. The number one threat to your freedom and your well-being is your government. Now, before you decide I'm a radical, the number of deaths by government in the 20th century exceeds all other cause of death. Let me explain. You've got World War I, 8.2 million dead. You have World War II, 52 million dead. You have Stalin's political purges. Some people say 20 million, other people say 60 million dead, somewhere in that range. Nobody knows. And then you've got the China Cultural Revolution after the communists took over in China in 1949. Now, all this is being done under socialist regimes, the people that were promising security to all their people, giving them all numbers, putting them all under control. We're talking about Stalin, that was socialism. We're talking about China, that was socialism. Why in the world would anyone favor socialism unless it's ignorance of history and what has actually happened? So you've got, let's add it up now. We've got in the two wars over 60 million. Then you got Stalin, that's at least up to 80, and then you got 60 million in China. That's 140 million killed in a 100-year span by the government. Now, add on to that, 125 million abortions? So now then you're up to 250, 270 million. I added it up one day, and it was well over 300 million that the government was responsible for the deaths. There's no other cause. So I want a good government. I want to be proud of my nation. But I don't want to be stupid either. I don't want to deny the facts of history. Study history. And throughout history, government has been the number one threat to the well-being of its citizens. Therefore, the Constitution is designed to put handcuffs on government and say you can only do this much. Our government here in America is designed, our Constitution is designed to limit the government, not limit you, to limit government.
Every Monday at 9 p.m. Central on the Church Channel and at 10 p.m. Central on Daystar, Irvin Baxter presents End of the Age. End of the Age is a 30-minute program which gives intricate details about how Bible prophecy is not only true, but also how it lines up so perfectly with events going on in the world right now. Don't miss one End of the Age program every Monday at 9 p.m. Central on the Church Channel and at 10 p.m. Central on Daystar. Visit endtime.com for more details or call 1-800-ENDTIME.
When you think about Bible prophecy or the end of the world, what comes to mind? War, destruction, famine, disease, 666, mark of the beast, antichrist, false prophet, four horsemen, trumpets, seals, and vials. What about 2012? How does all of this affect you as a teenager in today's world? Those are all good questions, but the thing to remember is that Bible prophecy was not put here for us to be afraid of it, but for us to know what is to come. When I was a kid, I used to pretend that I could see the future.